Mr. Young.
Mrs. Eaglin, I'm most intrigued by your long-range technology plan, integrating that into our overall planning process here. And so I wanted to briefly dig into that with you a moment. It seems like right now we first have the national security strategy coming from the White House and the President's advisors, driving the QDR, and then you propose adding an additional step after the QDR step before we come up with our inventory goals for our ships and our aircraft production. Is that correct? Did I put it in the right spot there in terms of the sequencing?
I'm open to the timing. I'm open to the sequencing. It could be off year every 2. So your R&D S&T plan could be 2 after the QDR.
But the developers of the technology roadmap, as you've styled it, would look to the QDR for strategic guidance, presumably, right?
Presumably, if the QDR takes a 20-year view, which this last one did not.
Okay. Which leads me to my next set of questions here. You've, I think, correctly indicated that any such document should prioritize our needs for additional investment in different capabilities based on those perceived threats and estimated threats out there. Right now, under the most recent QDR, it seems like the prioritization should begin there. Maybe should begin with the President and the national security strategy. Do we have that prioritization? And under the current strategic thinking occurring in the administration, do we have enough direction to be able to develop a prioritized long-range technology or R&D plan?
Unfortunately, no. So it does raise a difficulty in terms of doing it, but it doesn't mean it shouldn't be done because, for example, the last QDR was issued in the absence of a national security strategy, and it was largely based on a national defense strategy issued under the previous administration. And I would think Congress would have some problems with the Department not meeting its statutory obligations. It also, largely renders the document ineffective or at least not tied to the current administration's foreign policy, of which defense policy is a derivative.
Right.
In this case, we had the cart before the horse. And the Secretary, at his recent speech at the American Enterprise Institute, basically alluded to, shockingly, some shortfalls in the QDR planning process, which I think should inform the NDAA debate this year, in fact, saying that there isn't a good link to force structure, and certainly, I'm paraphrasing here, of course, and some other challenges therein. The last QDR served to simply justify the 2010 defense budget. I didn't see it as much more, not to be overly simplistic. So it does pose a challenge for a long-term R&D and S&T plan, but it doesn't make that need irrelevant because neither of those are really being talked about now. For example, in the aviation plan, we heard the Navy talk about the need for a next-generation air dominance fighter sometime after 2019. The Air Force says they need a new cargo jet, but we're getting ready to shut down our only wide-bodied aircraft production line right now. So, I mean, these are, like I said, it's all about the back end clarifying the front end investment choices.
Right. So, to break this down to sort of real-world decisions that those of us in Congress and even people in the Pentagon are asked to make, career military people, I think prioritizing whether we invest in satellite recapitalization or next-generation rotary wing aircraft and in setting those priorities and determining what level we're going to fund each respective technology becomes impossible, frankly, to do in an informed fashion unless first the administration and then the Pentagon with their robust QDR, unless they do their homework. Am I correct on that analysis?
Yes, you are.
Okay. Where, in your estimation, in this model from QDR to the technology roadmap and then setting the inventory goals, at what point do we consider resource constraints, especially since our Chairman of the Joint Chiefs and many other observers have noted that our national debt constitutes our nation's greatest national security threat? When do we consider those resource constraints? Is it way back in the QDR process or the national security strategy, or is it after we've developed inventory goals for our Navy?
Well, DoD currently does it as part of the QDR. And the 2010 QDR said, vaguely referenced here, that it took resource constraints into account. It didn't project, I think, a cost growth 0% or 3%, but something about an inflation-adjusted flat defense budget, roughly speaking, was what it predicted. So that is one way of taking it into account. Now, that doesn't take into the roles and missions review that's ongoing now that's going to need to inform the next QDR because it's going to be significantly different with up to $400 billion in cuts.
But looking to previous years or previous decades investment in, say, shipbuilding,
Right.
Is probably not the best way to benchmark future investments, right?
I think that's fair.
Okay. Thank you.